Somebody's having a party. There it is. Almost. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, let me just put a tag on it. Here we go. Boom. All right, here we go. This is week number 5 or 4. God,
Sure.
4. Yeah. So I don't know why I can't. I keep getting you mixed up with that dude from where's he from? Melbourne, I think. Because I started doing a weekly with him,
Ah,
but it was right around the same time. It must have been the week before because we were on our 5th one.
mm.
All right. So here we are. It's all about ghost stories. The ghosts that appear, and the more ghosts that are appearing, and the more things that are appearing that we now recognize are ghosts. So here we are with the series, The Aura Covert. And we had an interesting show last week because people were coming up with these movies, which many of them I didn't walk into the situation thinking they were ghost movies, but they certainly were, which had me thinking about a lot of different movies after that. But then just the whole concept of the term or the energy of ghost. And it's just taken on a world of its own, when you think about it. And now I'm wondering what other words would have that same type of explosion or extrapolation.
Well, there's certainly many ways to look at ghosts, aren't there, and the supernatural. And again, Todd, it's exciting that we have a growing group of listeners that are contributing input to the show.
Mm.
I regularly get email and messages about topics that people want to explore. So for this week, I do have some more movies to bring up that we
Oh,
can
cool.
explore. But I'd also like to start with a story because
Okay.
the theme today that seems to come up a lot in the suggestions of our listeners is the whole idea of inversion. Now, inversion is not something that maybe people would traditionally associate with ghosts, but today we're going to explore it. So, by inversion, I mean the idea of seeing something from a different point of view. Some people would say upside down, backwards, just different. So here's the story. The story is called Two Babies in a Womb. One says, do you believe in life after delivery? Of course, there must be something after delivery, right? And the second baby says, well, nonsense. There's no life after delivery. What kind of life would that be? And the first baby says, well, maybe we'll walk on legs or eat with our mouths or use senses we can't even understand yet. And the second baby says, ridiculous. Walking is impossible, and eating with our mouths, that's absurd. The umbilical cord supplies all we need, but it's too short. Life after delivery, it's logically got to be excluded. So the first baby says, well, what if it's just different? What if we don't need a cord anymore? And the second baby says, okay, if it's real, why has nobody come back after delivery? There must only be darkness, silence, oblivion. That takes us nowhere. And the first baby says, but surely we'll meet mother. She'll care for us. And the second baby says, you actually believe in a mother? I mean, where is she? We don't see. And the first baby says, but you know what? What if she's all around us? What if we are her? What if it's within her that we live? And what if this world couldn't exist without her? And the second baby says, well, I don't see her. It's not logical. She's got to be an illusion. And then the first baby says, well, sometimes in silence, when you really listen, you can perceive her presence, hear her heart, her voice calling down from above, from somewhere you can't quite put your finger on. So I thought I'd leave you with that for starters. Have you heard that story before, Todd?
Hmm. No, I haven't heard that story, but
Mm,
it's a good allegory. It's a good metaphor. Um,
mm,
the first thing I thought of was, isn't that strange? This conversation of the story and the umbilical cord tied to the babies. And then it made me think of the silver cord,
mm,
you know? So it's like it's the same template in some way. And yet
mm,
that conversation of the babies is no different than the conversations we have here, you know? Where is God? Where is the mother? You know, one
mm.
baby would say, and the other would say, you know, the polarity of it. And then it makes you even wonder, does it go deeper than that? Like when I was in the void that was my soul, I think. That was having all these questions.
Mm,
Cool,
exactly.
cool story though.
Well, the thing is that we're taught as human beings to be focused on where we're going next, right? There's got to be a heaven or something, an afterlife. And this is part of where the whole concept of ghosts comes from, because people will imagine that disembodied spirits are sort of in flux. They haven't quite made it there. And we ought to help them, or there's something wrong with them. You know, it focuses on that part of the journey. But it doesn't imagine that, well, wait a second. What if we looked at the idea of being a spirit, having a human experience? And what if what is surrounding us as symbols and experiences are actually a version of ghosts?
Mm,
And I feel this is a really good leeway into some of the films that
mm,
have been suggested to look at. Now,
mm.
I wonder if you're familiar with The Sixth Sense. Do you remember that one?
Was that Bruce Willis?
Bruce Willis, 1999.
Was
Yes,
that the one with the little boy?
it was
Oh
with the
yeah,
little
yeah.
boy.
I see dead people. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was
Yes,
cool.
I see dead people. That's a very
Yeah,
famous line, isn't
yeah, yeah,
it?
yeah.
So, what do you remember about that movie?
I don't remember a lot. Well, I remember there was the boy was seeing. I remember the storyline, which eventually was a crime, if I'm not mistaken. If unless I'm getting that mixed up with another one. But I don't remember the details of it. I just remember that line.
Okay, well, it's one that does stick. I can understand why you'd remember. Well, for those who haven't seen it, there is a boy and there is Dr. Crow, who is played by Bruce Willis.
Hmm.
And Bruce Willis is supposed to be this psychologist, and he attempts to help this young boy who claims to see ghosts. And the idea is that um, he is sort of confronted with a lot of things that scare him in the movie. There are many different examples of what ghosts are. And when we reflect on ghosts, we often think of a transparent entity, you know, that's floating around. But in this particular movie, there is an inversion because we have assumptions throughout the movie of one thing, what ghosts are. And by the end, we are told that actually it's the very opposite. Do you remember the twist?
Somebody just gave it away. That Willis was dead or was already transitioned, right? He was actually the one that was, you know,
That's
there's
right.
a, yeah, yeah. It reminds me of another movie I saw not too long ago, like last
Mhm.
year or two, with Matthew McConaughey,
Mhm.
and I think it's called it's a girl's name, the movie, like Eternity or something like that,
Mhm.
and he's a like a either a fisherman or a shrimper or something. He has a boat or lives on the boat,
Mhm.
and he goes through this whole thing, and at the end realizes he's not there. I mean, he's dead. He's a ghost. So it's similar.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's an
Well,
interesting
it,
proposition.
it's fu- it's funny how the idea of losing contact or losing touch with reality is often viewed as psychosis in this world,
Yeah,
right? And yet, if we look at the metaphor or the angle that's taken in that movie, it's sort of flipped around, isn't it?
Mm,
Because who's really having the psychosis? It's not who we think is having the psychosis. We're led to believe one person is dreaming, is the ghost throughout the movie, and then it turns out it's not. So it's inviting all of us, perhaps on some level, to reflect on how we are walking ghosts. How are we seeing ourselves? How are we seeing the world around us? And what are we really seeing? Is it what we're telling ourselves, or is it perhaps something else?
mm. Yeah. And as time goes on, you start to respect the paradox, which creates an unknown element of reality, because there seems to be one thing that is, and then there's another side that we reject uh, because it can't be possible. So, to your point, I think of what we call mental afflictions.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, to be open to the idea that perhaps they're in the more true reality and we're the ghost in this other reality because they
Hmm.
have a vision, they have a psychosis, you know, technically. And then if you look at people's wake up experiences and some of the things that happen within those wake up experiences, um, you know, such as visitations and apparitions and things like that. Um, and we had these experiences and we continue to doubt ourselves, you know. So there's something to that. There's something to being open to the other end of the spectrum, especially when you consider that the predominant conditioning has been to label it a certain way, and everybody's kind of been rubber stamped. And like you said, it's kind of like upside down.
Mm.
So, you know, that's, I don't know if that's, you know, because obviously to stay in on one end of the spectrum, we've come too far in consciousness to realize that you can't stand pat. So now we have to be open to the other side of the spectrum, which uh, you know, which has to have, you know, at least as much um, consideration. And then, and maybe what it is as we do that and kind of accept both and let go, we end up in the middle, and that's getting shot out of the birth canal to that. And then the umbilical is
Almost
going to
like
be
a
cut.
rocket.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
Well, it's also inviting us to reflect on the Hermetic saying, as above, so below, as within, so without. What is that really inviting us to see? Well, it's inviting us to invert how we're taught to see things because so often we are affected by the external world. People will wake up in the morning and notice the weather is horrible and decide they're going to feel awful because the external world told them that's how they're supposed to feel, right?
Mm,
But what happens when we realize that how we're feeling inside is actually what is projected into the external world, both personally and collectively? It's another kind of inversion because sometimes when people think of aversions, they think, above, below, you think of a fraction as above, so below.
mm,
But it's not really in that direction. It's simply recognizing that we're conditioned to see and experience the world in a certain way. And as we begin to question, then we start to realize that perhaps how we've been taught to see things isn't necessarily the only way to see them, and perhaps it isn't as accurate as we're taught either, right?
mm. Yeah, exactly. You know, I think
Hmm.
of a pretty good example right now. There's that Atlas 3 or whatever it's called, that giant object that's moving. Now it's getting close to Mars.
Mm.
And then, you know, any researchers in the last 20 years, and you know, we've all kind of done it, at least in a fast track method at some point. You hear about Project Bluebeam and a fake alien invasion. And, you know, on one hand, you know, you even see it on social media. People are saying, oh, here we go. They're going to try it. And, but there's another part that says, what if? You know, what if it's bigger than all of us? Whatever's being presented, or you know, let's just say, um, you know, kind of premeditatively planned out to control or whatever the case is. But what if it is something else? And if it's something else, then the two things we're thinking of, maybe it's even something beyond that. Like it kind of puts you in no man's land. It's kind of like being in a walking void. If you continue to, open up to and really consider things, because what can we really rule out? If we can think of it, it's real.
Mm. Well, that's true. Maybe there isn't much that we're meant to rule out. We're meant to keep an open mind
Mm,
and take things moment by moment rather than having expectations. There is that saying, have no expectations and never be disappointed,
mm.
which can certainly have relevance in that context. A couple of the other movies that came up, I'm not sure if you remember Fallen, Denzel Washington. Did you ever see that one,
Uh,
1998?
he was a cop, right? Wasn't he a
He
cop?
was, yeah.
Yeah, and and it was it Russell Crowe was the character?
There were a few people. I didn't
There were,
remember Russell
uh,
Crowe.
okay, so that would be another movie that I'm thinking of. It was one of his first movies, and he was this kind of a supernatural being. But Fallen, I can't remember that one, but I think there was a twist at the end too, and it was about the protagonist, right?
Yeah, it sort of looked at ghosts in the context of demons. It was actually pretty dark in terms of the story. Denzel Washington does play a cop, and essentially there is this demon, and he's supposed to have, or Denzel Washington's supposed to put this criminal away, but it turns out that the demon seems to be changing bodies and following him around, and
Mm,
it's through touch. That's the
I remember now.
concept that's used in the movie.
Yeah.
That, to haunt him essentially. And so it's looking at ghosts as hauntings, as something that we can't get away from, that as a metaphor are always following us wherever we are, unless we face them. And so this is sort of a message which is sort of in contrast to something like City of Angels. Do you remember City of Angels?
Yes.
Nicolas Cage and Meg Ryan.
Yep. Yep.
What do you remember about that one?
He was an angel,
Yeah.
and he wanted to be human. And I think he was able to be human or something. And I don't know what happened at the end, but I think
Mm.
he went back to being an angel, if I'm
Mm.
not mistaken. Something like
Yeah, well,
that.
in terms of ghosts, he was an angel that was sort of haunting Meg Ryan in a good way because he had fallen in love with a mortal.
Hmm.
And of course, being an angel in the context of the story, she was out of reach. So he gives up his immortality to have a life with this mortal. But of course, uh, the universe being what it is, decided Meg Ryan was going to die when he had
Oh,
given up
okay.
mortality.
Oh, yeah.
So then she goes away, and he's rather distraught because of the choice he made with a certain vision and intention, and it didn't unfold the way he had planned. But that didn't mean that the movie didn't have its twists. It just sort of redefined the sense of ghost, and haunting in that sense was not in the context of demons or something evil. It was in the context of love. Now, how does love haunt us as a concept? That is a really interesting question, isn't it?
Well, yeah, as you're explaining that movie, the first example with Fallen is a traditional, stereotypical haunting.
Hmm.
And then as you were, summing that all up with the second movie, before you even asked the question, that's what popped in my head. Because what haunts you more than love? I mean, grief, which is
Mm,
what he had in that movie, right?
mm,
He had grief. But yeah, so again, the definition widens and actually becomes more humanized, less supernatural, and more paradoxical again. Like, be careful what you ask for thing. Because the universe, I've had this understanding since I reawoke, and heard it many, many times, which is never throw an absolute down on the universe because you're just asking for you're asking for a rude awakening. you know. It's kind of like, my dad used to say, you fall in a bucket of shit and come out with a pot of gold, but it's backwards. You can fall into
Another
a pot of gold.
inversion.
Right, right. I mean, so, and again, it's, I don't know, it's like a deeper exercise beyond PhD, in, I guess what you could call divine neutrality or I don't know if it's observer mode so much, but actually seeing things without judgment, if that's a space, that we visit from time to time, but it seems to be the curriculum here.
Mm, so very true. And it's I guess, a humbling reminder as well that the ego can have a vision of a dream or what it would like to do or have or become, but it's only a very small piece of the bigger picture. And in the case of the City of Angels, the ego, uh, the angel had an ego. I don't know if that's the way things really are, but the ego had a very limited idea of what regaining mortality was going to be like. And that angel that became human discovered that there was a lot more to it than
Mm,
he had imagined. So he still went on a journey through love to rediscover another facet or another um, approach to what love is. And the fact that love is haunting in that movie, or can be looked at as something that sort of follows us, is a very interesting concept to reflect on too. Because what is it that people want more than anything else? What
mm,
is it that they crave, they seek
mm,
in symbols, in experiences? It's love, isn't it?
mm. Yeah, and if you think about the narratives of the timeline of the last 12 to 15,000 years, um,
Mm,
the the storyline of whatever a third of God's angels came down because be- you know uh, they were in love with the females here and kind of followed the same track as Nicolas Cage did. And from there you could say they were put in the pits of fire or whatever the case those narratives are. But think about that. Think about from an angelic form to come down and do what he did, and then the tables get turned on you because there's always an equal and opposite reaction, right? Like maybe they thought, oh, well, like he did in the movie, like this is going to be great. And all of a sudden, the other one's gone. And so
mm,
now you're in this, uh, this creation that you've made with your God-given abilities, but you're on your own, pal. Like, now what? Which seems to be seems to be in the air today. We were talking just briefly beforehand, and like, are we entering a space more and more every day? Especially, I would say, like those that are maybe on the front end of it. Uh, kind of setting the tone for our GPS from this point forward, and maybe the collective consciousness, and maybe the transformation that might be seen in the physical, based on um, just not so much trying to make life happen, but just letting it do its thing. Maybe if we don't pick sides, it comes to us with ease and grace and neutrality and harmony and Eden-esque experiences.
mm. I love how you make reference to the gods and the goddesses. You've got such mythology out there in different
Mm,
cultures that
mm,
that plays on that. Greece being a huge one, where the gods come down to experience life with the females, and then there's stories of goddesses as well. So the whole concept of ghost is really expanding here.
mm.
Uh, I wonder if you remember The Green Mile. It was a Stephen King
Oh,
story that was made into a movie years ago as well.
mm,
Tom Hanks was in that one.
hmm.
He's the actor that might stand out to a lot of our viewers and listeners. Um, but there was a particular character in that movie that stood out to one of our listeners, and that's why he wrote to me about it. John Coffey. Do you remember John Coffey?
Yeah, I do.
What do you remember about him?
Well, he was, at first glance, again, stereotypically, at first glance, especially with the crime that had been put upon him. So he's huge, he's scary because he's so big. Yet here we go again with the paradox or the irony. He's probably I don't know, a portrayal of as human uh, of an earth angel you've ever seen. And
Mm,
not to mention, which again kind of speaks to where we're at, in my opinion, which is as we, um, bring these things and face these things and come to not the one spectrum or the other end of the spectrum, but that place in the middle, like the saying, there's three truths: yours, mine, and the truth. So, but but what happens when we operate in that space, which I don't think is just about right or really right and wrong. It's just more of a vibration, a frequency, a natural flow. And in that state, as we sustain it and expand it, our skills and abilities kick in.
mm,
The coding of our uh, original genetics maybe kick in, and that's what he had. He had superpowers.
mm. Yes, he was sort of known as a gentle giant, wasn't he? And
Mm,
he did have these Christ-like supernatural powers, but we're taught to assume that the abilities he had are rare, that what he was able to do is something that few people are able to do, rather than embracing the possibility that we all have Christ-like consciousness accessible within ourselves. And in the film, there were two events that really stand out to me with him. There was the instance where the rat is accidentally killed by one of the guards, or maybe not accidentally, depending on how you look at it. And John Coffey sort of blows life back into it,
hmm
which is quite remarkable. And then there is the instance where one of the guards has some sort of illness, and Coffee absorbs whatever that illness is, and he exhales flies. The idea of something that he no longer needed or wanted just sort of flew away. And I find it's very thought-provoking, because ghosts generally are those things we're supposed to fear. And so you look at someone like John Coffey's character, and he is big, he's intimidating in terms of size, but in terms of his gentleness and his heartfelt behaviors, it really invites us to invert our assumptions and really question the beliefs that we're taught to adopt based on appearances.
mm, yes, yes, yes. I think of a ghost event I had just popped in my head. Uh, I was in the original studio. I was upstairs and I was hunched over the bed, I think maybe folding clothes or something. I didn't see this, but I smelled it and I felt it and I could sense the size of it. I live next door to a cemetery, so it was very common. But this
Mhm.
particular ghost was huge in comparison to the other entities I'd run into, and it had this very rank smell. But
Mm,
this was the first time that I guess I would say I didn't base my reaction on on the typical,
mm,
even though I didn't see him as John Coffey. It was this huge entity. So I just simply talked to it and I said, listen, um, I mean no harm. I know you don't mean any harm. This is not, this is our space, and we'd be happy for you to just, pass on through, which is what happened. But I think of that because experiences that I had prior to that, I immediately, cut and run, or, or went into
doesn't feel
defense.
right.
Yeah, fight or flight. Yeah, I went into fight or flight.
Mm.
So yeah, there was another movie I was thinking of that was like, oh, have you seen the movie Meet Joe Black? Did we talk about that last week?
We started to, and
Yeah.
that's actually another one to bring up. Why don't you share a little bit about that one?
Well, I just think it's interesting because as you were talking about City of Angels and Fallen, very similar. So he plays this character. He's death, basically. And he's come to get Anthony Hopkins, who's a very rich, wealthy, successful man, and who has a beautiful daughter that's a doctor. And so death falls for the doctor.
Of
And
course.
right. And so he takes Anthony at the end, and then at the very end, Brad Pitt comes back as a human. And so I
Mm.
was thinking, as you were talking about those two movies, I was thinking, oh boy, I wonder what the sequel would have been like, because the twist would have to come. Because I think that's really, if you look at it, whether it's a nightmare or a fairy tale, you can't stay attached to it forever. Now,
Mm.
so, energy is going to evolve, universal energy, and it may be with the landscape and the time and space and the characters, it may be with them or not. But whether it's a nightmare or a fairy tale, they really are one and the same thing, you know. I mean, it's that's a commonality that they both carry, and that's one of infinite uh, repercussions.
Mm. And as you bring that up, it reminds me of a movie with Nicole Kidman years ago called The Others. I don't know if you remember that one. Um,
I think it was like a haunted house kind of scenario.
it
Yeah.
was, and she was her daughter was sick, and she was sort of caught between worlds, spooling. I guess caught in a time loop would be one way to look at it, and she had interactions with someone who was in the physical, but she didn't know she was dead either. So the process of the movie was guiding this ghost to awareness so that she was ready to move on and see what was really going on. And when we reflect on ghosts as a concept of ignorance or a concept of forgetting, part of transforming ghosts into spirit within ourselves is coming to that awakening, the realization of how we see things that is flawed. And once
Mm.
we come to see through our own misperceptions, let's say, then we transform our ghosts, much like happened to Nicole Kidman in that movie.
Hmm. Yeah, bingo.
Mhm.
That's a big bingo right there because the reality is it is our perception. And
Mm.
our perception's been molded, which is just by design, or you might say temporary design, especially if you consider the growing and common uh, agreement of an expanding consciousness through the individuals, and the baseline of it being that we are projecting our reality, and maybe we're
Mm.
getting to a point where we found the origin of our temporary God or lesser God or whatever that force is that's created an illusionary world full of ghosts. Um, but yeah, it's as simple too as to me anyway. I'm not saying easier said than done, but it's what's that saying? I don't know which master said it, but when you change your perception in the present, you change your past. And I guess that's
Mhm.
another way of saying, if the ghost walks in the door now, as opposed to 10 years ago, granted you've had some expansion and you can look at it totally different. Not only uh, not be afraid of it, but also be open to the wisdom that it offers, because that's really where what it's all about.
So very true. And what a perfect lead into the next movie that's been suggested by one of our listeners. Perhaps it might be less recognized by some, but it's called The House with the Clock in the Walls. Did you happen to see that one?
I think I did see that, but I can't remember it. I can't remember that one.
Kate Blanchett is one of the actress. Well, she's the actress, main actress in it. There are other people that may be recognized, but it's the idea of this malevolent kind of power in the wall, and it's linked with time. And time is sort of looked at as the ghost in the movie, which
Mm.
is a very interesting metaphor, when you say.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Which is, which again, I mean, if you really think about the structure of this realm, at least in the last whatever, time is a ghost. I mean, we're,
Mm.
we're we're getting to a point where we're starting to look at time and say time's not real. Many of us don't feel the pressure of time anymore. Yeah, but continue.
Well, Selena is this character that's disembodied from her ghost in, or from her corpse in the movie. And the idea of the clock in the wall, it's this idea of something has been activated by a lunar eclipse, and it's linked to an apocalypse. So there's this race to find the clock in the wall because there's the assumption that everything is going to be destroyed when it reaches that particular point. And the idea that time is the ghost, the ultimate ghost, is a bit um, ironic in the sense that time is what runs our lives in the third dimensional world. And we allow it in certain contexts to do that. But more and more people are shifting out of that aspect of 3D reality. Um, COVID is one of the reasons that's happened for many people, where there's more people working remotely, redefining what work is, not basing their existence on a collective clock so much as starting to self-regulate, starting to decide when their work hours are, what they're going to do, and it isn't always for someone outside of themselves. So we have this more entrepreneurial kind of energy that has been emerging. And I find that that is a very interesting sideline to that particular movie.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. It reminds me of an old Twilight Zone. I think it was Burgess Meredith. Those old black and white Twilight Zones. And he
Love
loved,
those.
right? And I might be getting too mixed up because one of them was all about time. It was like tick, 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 and I think it was with him. He didn't like people, but he loved to
Mm,
read. But he loved to read, and so he woke
mm.
up one day and the whole world was empty but him. So he went straight to the library, and he thought he was going to be in hog heaven, and he dropped his glasses and stepped on them. So, so he was going to be in a world with no people because he didn't like people, and he loved books, but he couldn't see.
Well, that's an interesting metaphor too, isn't it? Just it's the idea of writing the books in our mind. There's so much truth to time travel between the ears because the mind is such a labyrinth in and of itself for what goes on there.
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Another movie that was brought up, which is actually a trilogy. Many people might relate to The Matrix. Did you ever see The Matrix,
Oh
Matrix
yeah.
Revolutions,
Oh yeah.
Matrix um, Restoration, I believe it was?
Yeah. I watched all three. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And those movies are, of course, timeless for many people because of the metaphors in them. How did they stand out to you? What do you remember?
Um, well, I mean, obviously there's a lot of symbology and play with names and words, acronymic type. And then of course the whole presentation of a controlled system that's not seen, like a cage that where
Mhm.
you can't see the bars. Uh, and then I don't know, in terms of like Ghost, I mean, I can look at many of the characters because they're archetypical. They're the Oracle or uh, what's the guy's name? Lawrence Fishburne's character. Other characters, the
Morpheus.
yeah, Morpheus, and then Trinity. So the names, and there's a lot to it. I actually just watched an interview with that lady that wrote all that. That was very interesting, very recent too. But I think as far as like ghosts go, I would almost look at it, and I don't know if other people could relate, but I almost look at it like Mr. Smith. because no
Hmm.
matter how much you um, try to stamp out Mr. Smith, they just keep coming at you.
Keeps
You know what I
coming
mean?
back like a bad dream.
Yeah. Yeah. And so at some point, if you apply what we were talking about, how do I work with this apparent ghost, or that wants to hurt me or harm me or control me or whatever the case is. And again, I'm approaching this from an energetic, eternal soul perspective, as opposed to a human that can be snuffed out. But yeah, I mean, to me, it's almost like a multi dimensional ghost, because everywhere you look in the movie are ghosts. Even the Oracle's a ghost. You know what I mean? Morpheus is a ghost. The Smith's the ghost. The Matrix the ghost. And obviously with the cinematography, like with the fetuses in the whatever those the chironic um, containers, the pods, or some of the other weird stuff. So it's just like one ghost scene after another, with ghost everywhere you looked.
Well, it sort of reminds you of something that was mentioned to me more than once, the idea that, every bit of information that exists is in every book, is in every movie. And based on what your experience has been, based on your level of consciousness, if you will, you're going to see what you're ready to see. And one of the things Morpheus says in the first Matrix movie is he says to Neo, you have to understand that most people aren't prepared to be unplugged from the system. And he's referring to this deep truth of human nature and how many people have forgotten who they are. And when you look at the system itself is a metaphor for what is real. And when we look at what is real or unreal, that brings up the concept of ghosts. Because if you can see through something, if it's transparent, there's a bit of irony there. Because if you can see it as it is or for what it is, we're not supposed to see it as a ghost anymore. But we're taught that's what a ghost is. So we're actually taught things backwards in order to confuse us. I find a really interesting story related to that has to do with the biblical story of, God supposedly, or the divine force, however you see it, was going to hide the greatest secret in a place that no one would ever look. And where would that best hiding place be but within ourselves?
Mm,
Because we're taught to look outside of ourselves for answers. We're not taught to look within. And in the Matrix, as you point out, there are so many things you can look at as ghosts because not everybody sees the same thing. Just like you
mhm,
and I, Todd, could look at a cloud and we could see different things in the same cloud because of what we're looking for, what we're ready to see, what we feel. One
mhm,
of the characters that stands out to me is the little boy with the spoon
mm.
and Neo, who is asking him about this spoon, and the boy says, "There is no spoon."
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think again, it's a good point of reference for what we're going through on a collective scale. So if you go back 120 years, um, from that point, you have the education system, science, the medical part of it, of course, oligarchy, propaganda through media, and then other control mechanisms like central banking, income tax, and then of course the influence of world wars and such. So my point is that you're if we were in a design where the basic pillars of our reality are fully controlled, okay, and then it's pretty hard to find yourself. I mean, or I would say it's pretty hard to let go of one or two or three or certainly all of those. And this to get to a certain point and say, well, wait a minute, these are all made of the same constructs. And and
Mm.
and where that leaves me is nowhere. I mean, there's nothing else to you know what I mean? So it's kind of ingenious. Um, And again, it's also reflecting the inverse again, because, on one hand, what we think we're seeing is not what's there. There's something else. But from the other side, if they have whoever they are, the intention is out there, and we play this role. I'm going to do this and control this and control that and control this and create this story and this image and persona. Yet what happens is the opposite of what you wanted. And if you look at COVID, that'd be a perfect example. That'd be a really good example because it's actually done what we're actually talking about. People are going, well, if that's not real and that's not real, and they would lie, they call it cognitive dissonance, but I think it's just what Morpheus said. It's not so much that there's anything wrong with people but it's going to take, it's going to take a little bit of spoon feeding because it's a huge proposition because it's the entire reality. I mean, people to find out, or let's just say one part of that. If it came out tomorrow, which I believe is true, but that's just my own thing, that, Carnegie and some of the other oligarchs took over the education system, which there's good evidence for that, and basically rewrote history, right? And this isn't even speaking to the suppression of the cures of cancer or other things involving some of the other so-called pillars. I mean, that's a lot to swallow. It really is.
Yes, you make a hugely important point there. And that's why the deconstruction of reality doesn't tend to happen all at once because many people aren't able to handle or stomach that. We take things apart piece by piece, and the films and the books that are out there are available to those who are ready for them. So I've had experiences where books will literally fall off shelves in shops or in libraries because I meant to find them, and they guide me to what I'm ready to see. But when it comes to the Matrix and that whole concept, um, I love how it points out it takes courage in
Mm.
order to take the next step, whatever that's going to be for you. In the movie, Neo's got his journey, and Trinity's got her journey. Morpheus has got his journey. Mr. Smith has got his journey. The Oracle's got her journey. They appear, they disappear, they do what they're meant to do. And it's an invitation to each of us to recognize that we're not all of those characters. We're unique and we have our journeys, but we can learn from what's going on around us as we turn inside ourselves and take a look at things from a different point of view, begin to question things, don't take things for granted, and recognize that we have this feeling-based compass inside ourselves
Hmm.
that many people are taught to lose touch with. We're taught to use the thinking mind, especially the left side of the brain, the logic, the reason. And when we get lost in that, and we're always seeking or taught to seek external proof for things, then we second guess the feeling-based compass. And it's actually the feeling-based compass, the intuition, that guides us to see the illusions that we've created and how they play out in different areas of our lives. Movies are a great place to see some of this because it is external to us, and we can relate or not. We can buy into the things we see or not based on what's palatable. And when we're ready, we begin to see things that we've been living that maybe don't make sense anymore. And my memoir that's coming out soon, Journey of a Ghost Medicine Woman, is my journey, how I see it through 100 ghost stories, revisiting places, relationships, and situations I've been in over 50 years, and coming to see that there's more than one way to reflect back on what I've done. And many people will relate to being able to look back and say, well, in at this stage of my life, I saw it this way. But now with the wisdom and experience I have, I see it differently. And that's what this is all about. It's not about judgment. There's no good or bad, right or wrong. This is just a journey of seeing things from a different point of view. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. There's a couple of points. One is the latter part of what you said. Uh, you know, it's almost like you could write two versions of a book, at
Mm-hmm.
least two versions of a chapter, let's say. Like, so you have chapter one, I'm 20 to 25 years old. These are the players. This is what happens. This is what's in my mind. But then you have uh the your age now writing the chapter over, and you have this other perspective, which means you have a different perception, which means going back to that meme I was talking about, or that adage of when you change your perception in the present, you change your past. So it may not look like that from a linear standpoint or a human conditioned perspective, but the reality is we have changed something energetically. We've gained the wisdom from it. Um, and then I can't remember the other one. Oh, well, I know what it was. So now, because I'm weird, okay. Um, see, I don't watch movies. I've gone through periods in the last 3 or 4 years. Sometimes I'll watch them, but I have a hard time. I'm not trying to burst anyone's bubble, but but there's a logic or an awareness of it, and there's also a great analogy. So if you think about all these scenes, like the book that you're writing, these are just many, many movies within your life. Okay.
That's right.
And what you said about, getting to the point where you question deeper and deeper and deeper, even things that you say, well, that's solid, that's a given, that's not going to change. But even those things come up. They're pulled up on the carpet. So if I watch a bunch of movies, um, I guess I've gotten to the point now where I see through the movie, and now I'm looking at the movie maker. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what's behind the movies? Because it's come from the same construct. So, I'm not going to run and hide from it, but I'm not watching movies like I used to. Like, there's certain movies I can't watch anymore, period. I mean,
I
that
agree.
I loved at one time. I just can't watch them because it's like, it's just not real or something. I can feel a vibe or whatever the case is. But if it brought me to a place, which I think is very much an analogy, uh, if it brought me to a place to question the movie makers, the
Mm-hmm.
whole thing, like what's the purpose, what was the ideas behind it, etc., then it's done its job. It's kind
Mm.
of like
Oh,
looking back, you know.
I was just going to say, I can so relate to that. And there are many people who would likely feel very similar. And you can look at the analogy of the Wizard of Oz and Dorothy finding the wizard behind the curtain, pulling all the knobs and handles and things.
Mm,
And when you shift from being a passive observer into one who questions or deconstructs for the purpose of appreciating cinematography or
mm,
the locations to the point where you sort of see the narratives, the cultural, mythological narratives and echoes of what's going on in society, then you view them from a different place. And
mm,
then another place is, of course, looking at your own life and seeing yourself as the director, the cinematographer, the producer, the writer of
mm.
your own movie that you can change and at any point. And that's a very important, empowering process.
Yeah, 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 it is. And that's another thing too. Like, again, even watching a movie, all right, it doesn't have to be The Matrix. I mean, one of my favorite movies is Kingdom of Heaven, because I love history and I like that kind of stuff. There, it doesn't if the movie maker conglomerate or whatever that is, energy complex or whatever that is behind it, even had the illest intentions. Okay, the mechanisms are still the same. Intentions of control and et cetera and et cetera, et cetera. And even the players that are in the movie making itself, they're still souls. They're still expressing themselves. So to me, it's a lot like the Matrix. There's a bunch of ghosts in these movies, but there's also a bunch of heroes. And I'm talking about the guy that got the wardrobes together, or the way they made this scene, or the way they used the horses, or just uh, you know there's so many are some of the words, some of the spoken words, the great lines that you remember. So there's always this yin yang thing to it, and that's what I always try to remember, especially in interactions with people, because it's not it's the same thing. Like say in your connection with somebody long term, like a family member or whatever, you have this prejudice and bias. You have this cognitive closed mindedness. You have what
Mm.
maybe it's superiority or maybe it's inferiority. Okay. But it's a lot like what we're going through. So you go through these situations and, let's just broaden it out a bit. The government lied, the religion lied, this lied, that lied. It's all being proven, yet we still got, there's still some semblance of wanting to hang on to it and see what they're going to say next and do for us next. You know, I mean, this is the whole thing about the movie thing. Don't get caught up in the movie. Don't get stuck in the grid because ultimately it leads you back right to the same yellow brick road, which is basically keep asking questions. And what are those questions really? Those questions are about you, yourself. That's it. I am God. And God said, or Mother Goddess said, you know, I wonder what I am. And then boom, it starts. And it's continued.
That is definitely the way things seem to be going. And just to refer back to Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz again, at the end of that movie, she has that discussion with Glinda. And Glinda says, the power, you've always held the power. It's always been within you. She's looking at her ruby slippers and noticing she's been wearing them all the time. But at the same time, she has had a wealth of experience she's accumulated through living. And that itself is priceless. So even if you come to a mental realization of who you are, it's not the same as living through the light and the dark, seeing how everything works together to make you who you are, because that is the ultimate, would you not say?
Yes. Yes. And it can go on and on and on because, if you look at The Wizard of Oz, for instance, which is, one of the giant, movies of the last century or really ever. Um, so there's a couple of things I could use as an example. One of them would be some people that have done researched into the dynamics of it, the intentions behind it, the symbology of it, and it's pretty fascinating because each one of the characters represents a certain part of the oligarch and a part of the plan. Uh,
Mhm.
Another one I can think, and so there's a whole bunch. There's a whole new movie there, right?
Mhm.
Now you're watching the movie from a whole different standpoint. Then
Mhm.
another one might be, and this is for the old hippies, turning on Dark Side of the Moon and getting high and turning the sound off and watching it and listening to Pink Floyd. And if you've ever done that, there's something to it. So there's another movie, right? So going back to your reflections of your memoir and how the words or the story is a different story today, which really changes the past that you experienced at the time. It's the same thing and it will continue and it will continue because in 5 years or say you're going to write a chapter this week and it's going to be in a certain time span 30 years ago. Uh, you had the story you had then, you had the story that you have in mind as you sit down to write it, and as you're writing it you start to have another story because you gain greater insight, so there's another story. But I think the best thing for me about what you said about the Wizard of Oz is the truth. And the truth is, uh, uh, life is uh, it's about living. That's it. It's about the experience, and that's what you said. She had this experience, this collection of experiences, characters, and et cetera, and everything that goes with it. That's the story. The story is in the present. And again, it's a multifaceted, multidimensional, multiple storyline from one story.
Mm.
I mean, yeah. Mm.
Mm. It's certainly one that could be revisited in different ways, but
Eh,
I love the fact that we are feeling our way through all these different movies and experiences together and just revisiting what stands out for us at different stages of life. Even the
Yeah.
movies we've talked about today and in previous episodes, uh, the idea of watching a movie in a particular era or a particular stage of life, you might have seen it a certain way. Today, you'd watch it in a different way, or you wouldn't watch it at all. But that
Yeah.
just is a reflection of where you're at and what's important to you at this point in time.
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful to all our listeners for their feedback and the emails that I receive, and I'm sure Todd is as well.
Yeah.
So keep those emails coming and let us know what you'd like to explore.
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't know where this movie thing was going. I'm just, I'm here for to facilitate and, walk this path with you as you, you know, um, reveal your movie basically through this book. But I recently saw, and people may have seen this, Dolores Cannon talking about, so many different souls that she came into contact through her work and how they'll come out of it, they'll come out of the experience and said, "Oh my God, this was just a movie," like a play. And so now, full circle, I see the relevance of bringing in the movies, and this could go on, you know, again. There's many movies within a movie, and a movie is what? It's a stream, of experience. And in that stream, there's many branches that come off of it. This is what we do. This is what we've been doing. So
Hmm.
interesting. Yeah, it's been great. And yeah, thank you everybody. And same time, same bat channel, same ghost channel, same ghost day.